They are not agree with the sanctions, but they are not agree with the sanctions for the same reasons that me. They were not agree with the sanctions because they say, we don't believe in the sanctions because the sanctions are the excuse that the Cuban government use. So even they are not agree with the sanctions. Yeah, but that's good. That's okay. I understand
whichever way we lift the sanctions, I'm happy with. I'll work with whoever.
I'm not opposing to that.
Yeah.
But I really can feel that they have like a profound love for Cuba. And I think like the people, when they talk about Cuban Americans in general, I think like I understand that hurts a lot and there is a lot of feelings and there is a lot of trauma that needs to be.
By the way, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining the broadcast. We're live right now. And you're in Havana, right? You're in Havana, Cuba. You're tuning in from
Havana.
Okay. We're going to get right into it. Obviously, the American government has decided to increase the embargo that it already had for the past 67 years. And right now, from what I understand, there's rolling blackouts taking place in Cuba. But can you give us more details about what the day-to-day experience in Cuba looks like?
Well, right now, the situation has been really complicated and it's getting worse. For example, the hospital have to cancel like other services that are not essential. So that means that urgent care and emergency rooms are the ones that are running right now. But the rest, for example, you have an appointment or a surgery that they call it elective, like cataracts or something like that, that is not necessary to go through immediately. You're going to be canceled until no one knows until what point. The students from university and college are taking classes from home, and the ones who are coming from different provinces in either other part of the countries are sending home. And that's it. You say, well, that's good, but the problem with Cuba is like when you don't have electricity, you don't have connections. Barely. The public transportation is almost shut down. So people just can move around when they can walk or going in a bike or electrical vehicle, something like that. But you actually can go farther because that means that you have to pay like a private taxes and it's getting expensive because the prices of the fuel right now is skyrocket. So the situation at the Blackouts they're famous for, I think like right now it's more than 12 hours, 14 hours, depends. But I'm pretty sure that in the countryside, I'm talking about in the city because we are in the capital right now in Havana. But in the countryside, the situation is more worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the different ways in which the Cuban government currently is getting energy, or is it like is it as dire as the way that it's been presented in Western press in general, where from our understanding there is currently no oil on the island whatsoever, and that people are resorting to different means, or is there a way to procure oil at the domestic level at all? Obviously, it's be enough to make up for the demand and the needs, but is there a lifeline at all?
Well, if we are keep following the Western, unless will be shut down 2 weeks ago, I think so. Cuba produced some oil. It's not good quality oil, but we produce some. It's not, as you said, enough to maintain the whole country running, but it's something. And also, I think like the Cuban government is putting a lot of will to increase our city using energy through renewable energies. Right now, solar partners are running the 10% of the energy that is to electrical grid nowadays, and they are trying to increase that capacity. But that also means that we need to increase our capacity to storage that energy, because of course we are in Cuba in the Caribbean, we have a lot of sunny days, but you can't control the sun and intensity. So you need to try to find a balance. That means that you need money for investment and for create that conditions in order to be able to produce as much as energy as the people demands in Cuba. Right now, there is a lot of like some media that has been reporting one crude like oil shipment that is going in Matanzas and another one, but we don't know for sure how much oil that ships are bringing to Cuba or for where or from where. I think that that's an information that just the government is managed right now, and everybody could understand that this is just a national strategy security, because if the United States knows about this, he's going to put, and also he's going to be sanctioned of the country who is sending oil to Cuba. This is not like oil for free. We are buying that oil,
Yeah.
but even though that country is under sanctions.
Yeah. There's been talks about potentially like Russia stepping in, but I feel like given its proximity and given the fact that the American government has already intercepted oil tankers leaving Venezuela and going back to Russia, there is like what's the attitude from the Cuban government as far as you understand about like potentially having Russia play a bigger role here to provide oil?
Well, we are thankful for that, but like as you said, like Russia is too far away from Cuba. We why we are going to buy oil from Russia and buy just oil from Mexico that is just in the core is able to, and it's a country that is able to send us. I think like what is happening right with Cuba is like we are out of solutions. So the people or the countries who are stepping out to helping Cuba is the one who actually can face the United States and in some way can decide what the United States will. And I think like it's important to people to understand that the oil blockade in Cuba doesn't start January 26th. The oil blockade that the U.S. oil blockade to Cuba started in 2019 when the United States, during Trump's first term, were sanctioned the shipments, like the oil tankers that were coming with oil to Cuba. That was when everything get like started. This is just the last chapter. This is not new. The blackouts in Cuba are not new. The scarcity of fuel or gas is not new for us. Of course, that we have been given like a lot of crisis in all these in the last decades, but this oil blockade is starting in 2019, and also the United States is not just stopping Cuba to buy oil from other countries, it's also stopping the main incomes that are coming to Cuba with the medical missions. Like you say, like Guatemala is shutting down Cuban medical missions. Like there is a lot of small countries in the Caribbean that has been threat by the United States. This is not like an asking or a warning. This is a threat to the United States to shut down the medical missions with Cuba, because they know that this is one of the Cuba's main sources of income right now, as is tourism. So,
what's your attitude about tourism, even coming into Cuba right now? Do you feel like it's still a lifeline, or because there's some confusion here in America and in many other places where people have this attitude that it's more so a burden now on the island rather than a benefit or a lifeline, that like tourists are still coming in.
Well, I don't know like where these like worries are coming. I think I understand a little bit, but Cuba's other country in the Caribbean needs tourism. This is one of our main sources of incomes. The way that we manage the tourism depends of us. This is like, for example, I think like yesterday I was having a conversation with people from the United States, and they said like, you actually want like Americans coming to your country? Do you know what they mean? I said, yeah. We live that. We go through that during Obama administration. We know what is increased, but it's like, and we are willing to take that risk because we can be just too apart from the United States. It's our one of our closest neighbor, and also, I think like the people doesn't understand how beneficial for both countries can be the cooperation and have like just normal relations between the United States and Cuba, because at that moment, Cuban companies were coming to Havana to put in money in Havana to create like, and the economy in Cuba was booming, and the sanctions like Obama doesn't lift the sanctions. It's just open a small window. And for the first time in many decades, for me, my friends didn't talk about leaving Cuba. My friends didn't talk about like I need something to help me to escape that island, because for the first time they saw that they have a future here, that they can have business here, that they just can survive here, because the relation between Cuba and the United States, like we need to survive every day to the U.S. sanctions on Cuba, to the U.S. policy on Cuba. And we are tired to be resilient and to have to survive to this situation. We want to learn how to deal with. Of course, that American tourism is bringing a lot of challenges to Cuba. Of course that is, but I really trust that we can manage, or at least we can learn how to manage that in a way that benefit the Cuban people.
Yeah. Speaking of 67 years of sanctions and what kind of impact that has had on the day-to-day existence of Cubans, what do you say to people that are Cuban immigrants that now live in the United States of America and who still claim, like Camila Cabello did recently, that the real reason why the Cuban population is starving and the conditions are getting worse right now is not because of the starvation brought about by the American government, but instead about the quote unquote regime and its despotic and oppressive nature?
Well, like the whole thing, like when I hear that kind of argument, I just say, okay, let's play this game. Get rid of the sanctions. Let's prove who are really let's get rid of the sanctions without regime change happening, because that's the goal. So if the sanctions actually doesn't care, let's get rid of it. And I think like for people that doesn't understand Cuba, and believe me, like I know that U.S. propaganda is really good. Like you just need to come back to Obama era. If you say that the sanctions doesn't any harm to the Cuban people, just come back to there. Let's ask the people, like the private business that was growing in Cuba and still is trying to grow and stay in Cuba. Let's ask them. And also, if the sanctions doesn't have any weight on this situation, why Cuban American politicians are talking about the hunger of a mother, of the suffering of a child that doesn't have medication as the price that Cubans who live in Cuba has to pay in order to get access to freedom. Why? So they know the entire time that the sanctions has been always affecting the people in Cuba.
Yeah.
So they just like playing this game like, no, it's not us, it's the regime, blah, 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 whatever. Well, if it's a regime, just get rid of the sanctions. That's the best way to prove your theory.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Except, of course, more and more public officials in the United States of America are open about the cruel nature of the sanctions while they celebrate it as a matter of fact, where they do talk about sanctions are actually a mechanism to starve the population, starve them enough that they get so angry that they overthrow their leadership and put a more pliant leadership in charge that is going to with American needs and American demands, the demands of the State Department. And I guess one of the other things that I think about is what we can do here to show solidarity, to show the perspective of Cubans on the ground. There's obviously a flotilla that we're working on bringing to Cuba right now. By the way, this entire time that you and I were having a conversation, your internet did not cut out at all. It's perfect. My internet has been so shaky that there have been numerous instances where it cuts out and my audience can't even hear what we're saying. Unfortunately, I'm recording it as well, knowing full well that there are going to be issues like this. But just know that you currently have in Havana better internet than I do in West Hollywood, California, in Los Angeles, which is another regular occurrence as a direct consequence of oligopolies and how much power corporations have here in the United States of America. But going back to going back to what we were talking about, what can regular Americans do, and how do you feel about initiatives like this flotilla that we're putting together right now?
Well, I first I want to comment something that you said earlier that was about like people who wants to actually and were happy and celebrated the sanctions. I need to make clear that sanctions are collective punishment. If you think that punishment an entire population and make them go through hunger, desperation, blackouts, like they have actually psychological impact, kids, like and all the people, is a win in order you get to have your freedom. You are not actually that's not a win. And there are things like if we actually, and I say like I'm gonna talk for myself. I actually don't believe that, and I know that this is maybe the thinking of a lot of people in Miami, maybe that people in the United States, the government of the United States can bring us freedom because in my opinion, they are not able to give freedom to their own people. How is it possible they are going to bring me freedom to myself and to my country? And I'm a Black woman, so I know what I'm talking about. And about solidarity, I think like the most important thing, because sometimes I just have this feeling that I'm talking with the people that have the same mindset than me. So we are in a kind of loop, repeating the same. I think like this important to try to be open to discussions and to arguments with people that don't think like us about Cuba, because there is a lot of misunderstanding about what Cuba means. And forget about us, forget about our life. I think like if Cuba lost this battle, the world is gonna lose this battle, because I think like the Cuba represent is the danger of the good example, the things that you actually can achieve being in a global south with a lot of little support. But if you care the people, you actually want to try to bring a change that represent social justice for them. And I think like if we lost that, if Cuba lost that, the war is gonna lose that, because I'm sure that the United States is gonna make sure that no other Cuba come and rise again. So that's important. That's why it's so important, the solidarity with Cuba. And we really appreciate it. We appreciate that people show up, because the actions talk more than words. The words are important, but actions are more important in this moment. And there were times I'm just like thinking about like the ways that we are building this kind of relationship with the words, like because in ideal world we don't need that people actually come to save us, because I think like we are a capable population to do the things right and to try to bring and build a future in Cuba. But because we are under siege and we don't have any control, any agency of going on with our life, because we don't have any agency of the sanctions, because Cuba as a country can't push back to an empire of the United States, what it represent. We need all mobilization of people as is possible. We need people to get educated and get educated right about Cuba. We need like a discussions about critical thinking. We need like visibility of the war that we are doing inside of Cuba, because I'm tired of people telling me what is happening inside of my own country.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking about international audience, like a mainstream media, with like, no, you are not talking about how is my life here, how we face that. And it seems like they live in a bubble. That's why I was laughing when you mentioned about mainstream media saying like, well, you're running out of oil soon, you're gonna die soon. No, we don't gonna die soon, and we haven't survived so many things in the past that maybe we can survive to this too. But the thing here is like we are tired of having to survive. We are tired of having to be resilient, and that's the thing. People are just tired. You just want to have access to food, basic food, access to medication. Cuba used to produce the 60% of the medications that we consume inside of Cuba. How is it possible that a country that is able to create a medication against Alzheimer that actually works, a medication against like a lung cancer, like a vaccine for COVID in month, is not able to have syringes? It doesn't have enough like tools or materials to take care of their own people. How is this possible that we get to this situation right now?
Yeah. I mean, that is the reason, like you said, it's the danger, it's the threat of a good promise, an alternative that is the reason why America has endlessly punished Cuba for the crime of having sovereignty and dignity. What would you say to, because there are a lot of Cuban fans that I have, Cuban American fans that I have that are obviously sympathetic, given my ideological background, given my advocacy. But they have conversations with their relatives all the time who, as I'm sure you're aware of, do not agree at all and do maintain the same position of Camilla Cabello and many others, Marco Rubio, people who even lie about why they left Cuba. I don't know if you know. Do you know that Bob Menendez and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio all left Cuba under Batista, and they lie in America all the time and say they fled Fidel Castro and Che Guevara? Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we did a documentary about this Harlan on the Heart about Menendez. So yeah, believe that. And like for me, like I understand that. Well, when we were shooting that documentaries, Belly of the Beast was shooting in 2023, two documentaries in the United States, Harlan on the Hudson and Uphill on the Hill. I have the opportunity to go to Union City, that is in New Jersey, and to talk to Cuban Americans, hardliners, Republicans, Democrats, some of them, but the most of them hardliners. And I really have a really good moment with this couple of elder people that was just talking about how much anger and danger this regime in Cuba made to them. And I was so touched for the way that they were talking to me about, because they were saying like, sorry if this like is hurting your feelings in some way. I say, no. But I can feel that they actually love Cuba. And they actually want the better for the people in Cuba and for the families, their relatives that they left behind. I can feel it. Even when we don't think the same. And I'm pretty sure that this government as the same like other governments have come in like a lot of things that are not acceptable, that we are not proud of that. But I think like it's important to talk about reconciliation, and it's important to talk about forgiveness, and because I think like the both of we have in common is like the love that we feel for Cuba. They are not agree with the sanctions, but they are not agree with the sanctions for the same reasons that me. They were not agree with the sanctions because they say, we don't believe in the sanctions because the sanctions are the excuse that the Cuban government use. So they are not agree with the sanctions. Yeah, but that's good. That's okay.
Whichever way we lift the sanctions, I'm happy with. I'll work with whoever.
I'm not opposing to that.
Yeah.
But I really can feel that they have like a profound love for Cuba. And I think like the people, when they talk about Cuban Americans in general, I think like I understand that hurts a lot, and there is a lot of feelings and there is a lot of trauma that needs to be healed in both sides. But I think like you can't desire the worst to the people that you left behind. That's not Cuba. That's maybe Miami, but that's not Cuba. So that's why I get offended. Yeah, that's why I get offended when the people say, oh, Miami's Cuba, is not Cuba. I think like the feeling is the same, because if you have the opportunity to come to Cuba as an American, people are gonna love you, gonna like embrace you, hug you, because that's the way it is. Like, and people understand like the difference is between the governments, and it's not a difference because, as I say, it's not like there is not a balance there. But they understand that it's like the government who wants to hurt us. It's not the people. So we embrace the people. We deserve the best for the people. So that's why when the Hurricane Katrina hit the United States, Cuba, one of the first countries to say, hey, we have a doctor brigade ready to go. And we put it Henry Reeve, because he was a U.S. citizen who fight in our independence. So we are always ready to help the United States. And people need to understand that better relation with the United States, normal relations with the United States, between the United States and Cuba, is also good and benefit the United States. Because how can you pretend that you're going to destabilize a country that is 90 miles away from you and it's not going to hit you in your face? If the situation in Cuba gets really critical, where do you think that the people in Cuba is going to go?
Yeah.
Jamaica, Haiti? No, it's going to go to the United States.
Yeah.
It's the way it want to works. So you don't, and also if you want to do business in Cuba, you don't want to do business in a country that is completely destabilized. So I think like people also need to understand, like, and all this damage is has been doing with the money that the taxpayers paid. This is not money that is putting in place in the United States in order to get to the people better life, better condition, better access to health care, whatever. It's just the money that they are spending to try to, they call it democracy promotion program, but they are really regime change program. They are trying to harm people. They are trying to suffocate, asphyxiate, and also kill people.
Yeah.
That's not fair for any of us.
Yeah. It's, we can't even fix our own democracy, and then we act as though we want to bring about democracy. But I think a lot of Latin American countries know when America starts talking about bringing about democracy, they mean regime change. They mean the installation of a puppet that is more pliant with the interests of their super wealthy. It is to rid countries of their sovereignty and dignity. That's the primary goal here for Cuba as well. Are there any parting words you'd like to leave with us? Thank you so much for coming on, by the way. And I do really appreciate the work that you do at Belly the Beast, because I feel, I'm sure you also know, voices that are oftentimes presented in American media are voices that are aligned with the State Department, that present a completely false narrative, and it's very rare that there are any opportunities to hear from Cubans living in Cuba that have a very different perspective than the only one that is unfortunately heard in mainstream news. Are there any? Do you have any parting words for the audience, and where can people find you?
No. Just thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And also, I highly recommend people follow Belly of the Beast or in all social platforms, because we are a small independent media outlet. So we need all the support that we can get.
Yeah. And I'll be seeing you when I get to Havana in a month or so. So, hopefully.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on.
Bye. It is a pleasure. Bye.